Wrong table, right fate, single mom's mistaken date, led her to a billionaire's love. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The soft hum of conversation and the clinking of silverware filled the air of a cozy Manhattan restaurant. Golden light spilled from pendant lamps, reflecting off wine glasses and polished cutlery. Every dish that passed looked like a work of art. To most people, this place meant luxury, but to Sarah Collins, it was a test of courage. She stood by the frosted glass door, clutching her phone and whispering under her breath, "Table 6, table 6." Her palms were sweating, and the second-hand dress she had ironed twice that afternoon now felt too tight. This was her first blind date in 5 years. A small, reckless promise she had made to her co-worker, insisting she was finally ready to move on. Through the reflection in the glass, she saw herself tired eyes, a faint line of worry between her brows, the quiet evidence of a woman who worked 2 jobs to raise a child alone. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped inside. The host greeted her with a smile. "Do you have a reservation, ma'am?" "Yes, I believe it is under Kevin Brooks." The host nodded toward the far corner. "Table 6, near the back." Sarah followed his direction, her heart pounding with each step. At the table sat a sharply dressed man with dark hair, eyes focused on his phone. His presence radiated quiet confidence, but his expression seemed soft, almost kind. She hesitated for a second, then smiled nervously. "Hi, you must be Kevin. I am Sarah. Nice to meet you." The man looked up, startled. For a split second, confusion flickered in his eyes, but he caught himself quickly. His name was Ethan Ward, not Kevin Brooks. In truth, Ethan was a billionaire tech entrepreneur waiting for a late business associate who had just cancelled by text. Yet something about the woman standing in front of him, her nervous smile, the tremor in her voice, made him pause. He could have corrected her immediately, but instead, he put his phone aside and said gently, "Hi, Sarah. It is nice to meet you too." Sarah exhaled, relief flooding her chest. "Gosh, I was so nervous. Blind dates are weird, right? My friend Jenny said you might be a little quiet so I can talk enough for both of us." Ethan chuckled under his breath. "Sounds like a good balance." As they talked, Sarah's words tumbled out in shy bursts. She told him about her son, about juggling shifts at the diner and sketching at night to stay sane. Her honesty surprised him. She spoke like someone who had nothing to prove and everything to hope for. "So, what do you do?" she asked. "I work in tech," Ethan replied vaguely. "Oh, like apps and computers. I am terrible with those," she said with a laugh. "Something like that," he said, amused by her openness. The minutes slipped by easily. For the first time in months, Ethan found himself enjoying a conversation without guarded politeness or business agendas. Her laughter felt like sunlight breaking through the sterile glass walls of his usual world. Then Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and froze. "Hey Sarah, where are you?" "I am at table 6. Looking forward to meeting you, Kevin." Her face drained of color. Slowly, she lifted her gaze to Ethan. "Wait, you are not Kevin, are you?" He shook his head, a hint of guilt in his eyes. "No, I am not." "Oh my God," she whispered, mortified. "I cannot believe this. I sat at the wrong table." She pushed back her chair, fumbling for her purse. "I am so sorry. I feel like an idiot." "Sarah, it is fine," Ethan began, but she was already halfway to the door, cheeks flushed, heart pounding. Outside, the chill of the city night hit her like a wave. She laughed under her breath, half in disbelief, half in despair. "Great job, Sarah. You managed to mess up dinner with a total stranger." She hurried toward the subway, unaware that the man she left behind, the man she had mistaken for her blind date, was still watching the door she had disappeared through. For reasons he could not explain, Ethan Ward, billionaire and founder of Ward Technologies, felt something stir in his chest that no amount of wealth or success had ever given him: curiosity, and maybe the first spark of something real. That night, Ethan Ward sat alone in his penthouse overlooking the New York skyline. The city glowed beneath him, glass towers piercing through mist and light. Usually that view filled him with calm satisfaction. Tonight, it did not. His mind replayed every second of the strange dinner with the woman who had sat at his table by mistake. Her nervous laugh. The way she talked about her son. The fact that she never once looked at him like he was someone important. She had treated him like an ordinary man, and for reasons he could not explain, that felt extraordinary. Across town, Sarah Collins dropped her purse onto the couch in her small apartment. The air smelled faintly of detergent and crayons. Her 7-year-old son, Lucas, was already asleep in the bedroom, his school project spread out beside him. She stared at the flickering light bulb above the kitchen sink and groaned into her hands. "You did it again, Sarah. Wrong table, wrong man." Her laugh came out as a sigh. She opened the refrigerator, saw only half a sandwich, and decided she was too tired to care. The next morning, the alarm buzzed at 6. She dressed quietly, careful not to wake Lucas, and left for her shift at the diner. The smell of coffee and sizzling bacon met her as she walked in. "Morning, Sarah," her manager called. "Double shift today. Table 4 needs a refill." She nodded, tying her apron tighter. Life moved on quickly here. No time for embarrassment, no time for what-ifs. At the same moment, Ethan was already in his office at Ward Technologies. The glass walls reflected the sunrise over the East River. His assistant, Claire, placed a stack of reports on his desk. "You cancelled dinner last night," she said. "Everything all right?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Just a small mix-up, nothing serious." But his mind was elsewhere, on a woman in a second-hand dress who had called him Kevin. 2 days passed before fate intervened again. It was Friday afternoon, the kind of cold spring day when the air smelled faintly of rain. Sarah had finished her shift and stopped by a small corner cafe to sketch. She pulled out her worn notebook, flipping through pages filled with faces of strangers. Sketching was her quiet escape, her reminder that beauty still existed even when bills kept coming. When the barista called her name, she stood to grab her coffee and froze. Ethan was at the counter, paying for a to-go order. For a second, she considered walking out, but he turned, saw her, and smiled with genuine warmth. "Sarah, right?" he said. "The woman from the wrong table." Her cheeks flushed. "Oh yes, that was me. I still feel awful about that." "Do not," he said gently. "It was probably the most interesting dinner I have had in months." She laughed softly. "Well, I'm glad my awkwardness could make someone's evening." He handed her a fresh cup. "Let me make it up to you. Coffee on me. It feels fair after the mistaken date." She hesitated, but his tone was kind, unassuming. "All right, just coffee." They sat by the window. Outside, pedestrians hurried through the drizzle, umbrellas tilting against the wind. Inside, the world slowed down. Sarah talked about her art, about raising Lucas, about how sketching helped her feel alive. Ethan listened intently, fascinated by her honesty. When she asked again about his job, he gave the same vague answer, something in tech. But this time, he asked her questions too. What inspired her drawings? Why did she love the city despite its cruelty? "Because it never stops trying," she said. "Even when it is tired or broken, it keeps going. Maybe I see myself in that." Ethan studied her quietly, the weight of her words sinking deep. He wanted to tell her the truth, to say that he owned half the skyline she was describing, but for once, he liked being just Ethan. As the afternoon light faded, Sarah gathered her things. "I should go pick up Lucas. Thank you for the coffee." "Of course," he said. "Maybe next time it will be the right table." She smiled, genuinely this time. Maybe. When she left, Ethan watched through the window as she crossed the street, her hair catching the wind, her sketchbook clutched close to her chest. Something inside him shifted. It was not just curiosity anymore. It was recognition. She reminded him of who he used to be before money and headlines, before every word he said came with a cost. That evening, as Sarah walked home holding Lucas's small hand, she felt lighter. She did not know why. Maybe it was the unexpected kindness of a stranger. Maybe it was hope, creeping quietly back into her life. Whatever it was, for the first time in years, the city lights above did not look so far away. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Ethan began to see each other by coincidence, or maybe by something stronger than coincidence. He stopped by the diner some mornings on his way to work, ordering coffee he never finished, just to hear her voice. She would find him sitting quietly at the corner booth, reading a newspaper, pretending not to notice when she smiled. Sometimes, he left a tip in the shape of a folded paper crane. It became their silent routine, something unspoken yet familiar. One Friday afternoon, the diner was nearly empty. Rain streaked the windows, and Sarah was sketching between customers. Ethan walked in, rainwater darkening his coat, and sat in his usual seat. "You really do not have to keep coming here," she teased, setting a mug in front of him. "Maybe I like the coffee," he replied. "Or maybe I just like the artist who serves it." Her cheeks warmed. "You are impossible." They talked for an hour about small things, music, the city, the way her son had started drawing his own superheroes. When she mentioned her dream of teaching art to kids who could not afford lessons, Ethan leaned forward. "If you could start tomorrow, what would you need?" Sarah blinked. "Paints, brushes, a space where the rent does not eat half the budget." She laughed softly. "Dreams cost money, Ethan, and I barely make enough to keep the lights on." He smiled but said nothing. Inside, he was already planning. That weekend, he asked if she would meet him at the park. It was the same park her son liked to visit, the one with the worn-out benches and the fountain that never worked. When she arrived, Ethan was sitting near the playground, holding 2 cups of cocoa. Lucas was there too, chasing pigeons with a paper airplane. Sarah watched as Ethan crouched down beside the boy. "That is a good design," Ethan said, adjusting the wings. "You know, when I was your age, I wanted to build things that could really fly." Lucas grinned. "My mom says dreams are supposed to scare you a little." Ethan looked at Sarah, eyes softening. "She sounds like a smart woman." That evening, as the sky turned orange, Ethan walked them home. The conversation flowed easily, as if they had known each other far longer than a few weeks. Before leaving, he hesitated at the bottom of the apartment steps. "Sarah, would it be all right if I called you sometime? Maybe dinner, that is not a mistake this time." "And?" She smiled, clutching her sketchbook against her chest. "I think I would like that." When he turned to leave, she watched him disappear into the streetlight glow, her heart strangely light. For the first time since her divorce, she allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to be loved again. Not out of pity, but out of choice. Later that night, she opened her sketchbook. On one page, she drew the park bench, the paper airplane, and a tall man looking up at the sky. She titled it, "The Stranger Who Looked Like Hope." Across the city, in his penthouse filled with silence and glass, Ethan looked down at the same night sky. For years, every decision had been calculated, every relationship a negotiation. But now, there was this woman who asked for nothing and somehow made him want to give everything. He poured himself a glass of water, caught his reflection in the window, and said softly to no one, maybe the wrong table was the right one after all. Over 2 weeks later, spring began to soften the edges of the city. The trees along the parkway were budding green, and the air carried that faint sweetness that only New York in April could hold. Sarah felt lighter these days. Her shifts at the diner were still long, but now there was something to look forward to. Every few evenings, Ethan would text her, never overbearing, never too soon, just a simple message like, "Coffee after work?" or "You and Lucas free this weekend?" One Saturday, he invited her to a small local gallery near the East River. Sarah almost said no. The idea of stepping into a place where art cost more than her rent made her stomach twist. But Ethan's voice over the phone had been gentle. "You belong in spaces like that," he said. "You just do not know it yet." So she went. When she arrived, the gallery was softly lit, filled with quiet music and the smell of oil paint. Ethan was waiting by the entrance, wearing a simple charcoal jacket instead of his usual suit. For a moment, she could not believe this was the same man she had mistaken for someone else weeks ago. "You made it," he said, his smile genuine. "I almost did not," she admitted. "I was afraid I would look out of place." "You could never look out of place in a room full of beauty," he replied. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You are too kind." They walked together between the paintings. Sarah's eyes lit up as she spoke about brushstrokes and color composition, about how each piece told a story without words. Ethan listened carefully, fascinated by her insight. He realized that she saw the world differently, not through wealth or status, but through emotion and meaning. At the far corner of the gallery, a painting stopped her in her tracks. It was a simple scene, a mother and child sitting beneath a streetlight, surrounded by darkness but still illuminated by a small circle of light. "That one," she whispered. "It feels like home." Ethan looked at her and saw the truth in her eyes. She was not talking about the painting anymore. She was talking about survival, about love, about finding light in the middle of struggle. When they left the gallery, a soft rain had started to fall. Ethan offered his coat, draping it gently over her shoulders. The scent of cedar and rain lingered between them. "I will drive you home," he said. In the car, Lucas's name came up again. "He has been talking about you," Sarah said, smiling faintly. "He keeps asking if the man from the park knows how to make airplanes fly higher." Ethan chuckled. "Then I guess I owe him a lesson." She turned toward him, her expression thoughtful. "You are good with him, you know. I did not expect that." "So, I like kids," he said. "They tell the truth. Adults forget how to do that." When he dropped her off, neither of them moved for a moment. The city hummed quietly outside. "Ethan," she said softly, "I do not know what this is between us, but thank you for being kind, for seeing me." He met her eyes, steady and warm. "You do not need to thank me, Sarah. You make me remember who I am." That night, she lay awake, replaying his words. They echoed somewhere deep, in the place where hope had once lived. Across town, Ethan sat at his desk, the glow of his laptop untouched. He was supposed to prepare for an upcoming charity gala, a major event for his company's foundation. But his thoughts kept drifting to Sarah Collins, the waitress, with the sketchbook who had accidentally walked into his world and quietly rearranged everything inside it. The next few weeks slipped by like pages turning in a quiet book. Sarah and Ethan fell into a rhythm neither of them had planned. He would stop by the diner on mornings when she worked the early shift. Sometimes he brought her flowers, small wild bouquets from a street vendor, never anything extravagant. Other days, he just brought conversation. For Sarah, it felt easy, honest in a way that did not require effort or disguise. One Sunday, Ethan invited Sarah and Lucas to visit the Ward Foundation's community art fair. "It is small, local," he said, "but the kids' work deserves to be seen." Sarah hesitated at first, worried she and her son might not belong in whatever circle he moved in, but his voice had a calm certainty that made her trust him. The event took place in a renovated warehouse by the river. Children's paintings hung along the brick walls, strings of warm light glowing above. Lucas ran from table to table, his sneakers squeaking on the concrete floor. Sarah watched him, smiling, then turned to Ethan. "You help fund this?" He nodded. "A few of us started it years ago. I wanted kids to have the kind of creative space I never had." There was a softness in his voice that caught her off guard. "You make it sound like you grew up without much," she said. "In some ways I did," he admitted. "Money does not fill every kind of emptiness." Later that afternoon, Lucas presented one of his drawings to the event organizer, a crooked airplane with a note, "Dreams can fly if someone believes in them." The woman smiled and pinned it on the wall. Sarah blinked back tears. As the fair ended, Ethan walked them to the car. "He has your courage," he said. Sarah laughed quietly. "He has more of it than I ever did." He looked at her for a long moment. "You are stronger than you think." "How?" The wind brushed against her hair, and for a heartbeat, everything went still. She wanted to say something, to tell him how much his presence had begun to mean, but the words caught in her throat. That night, Ethan sat alone in his office, the glow of city lights flickering through the glass. Claire, his assistant, entered with the gala schedule. "Everything is ready for next week," she said. "Press, investors, sponsors, everyone is expecting you to make the opening speech." Ethan nodded absently. "Thank you, Claire. Send the invites to the community artists as well, especially the local ones." Claire hesitated. "Including that waitress from the diner?" He looked up sharply. "Yes. Her name is Sarah Collins, and she is not just a waitress." When she left, he leaned back in his chair, a small smile tugging at his lips. He wanted Sarah to see his world not to impress her, but to finally stop hiding behind the partial truth he had told her. Across the city, Sarah was sketching by the window while Lucas slept. She drew the art fair, the paper airplane, and Ethan standing beside her son with his coat sleeves rolled up. At the bottom of the page, she wrote 3 simple words: "Worth believing in." Outside, the rain began again, soft and rhythmic, like the steady beating of a heart learning to trust something new. Neither of them knew what the gala would bring, but both could feel it, the shift between chance and destiny, between two lives that were never meant to cross, and yet somehow had. The night of the gala arrived, glittering and cold. A long line of cars curved in front of the grand hall downtown, their headlights cutting through the drizzle. Inside, chandeliers shimmered like constellations above a sea of tuxedos and gowns. Sarah stood just inside the entrance, clutching her small purse, her breath shallow. She had never been anywhere like this. Her entire dress had cost less than one of the glasses of champagne being passed on silver trays. Ethan had sent the invitation himself, a gold envelope with her name written in perfect ink. At first, she had thought it was a mistake. She had even called him to ask. He had only said, "You will understand when you get here." Now, as she looked around at the glittering crowd, she was not sure she ever would. "Mom, look," Lucas whispered beside her, eyes wide at the marble staircase. "It looks like a castle." "It does, sweetheart," she said softly, smoothing his hair. "Try not to spill anything, all right?" Before she could take another breath, Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs. He looked different tonight, but not because of his tailored suit or the lights reflecting off the marble floor. It was the calm authority in his eyes, the ease with which people greeted him, the way the entire room seemed to shift when he moved. The truth was beginning to form in Sarah's mind, but her heart refused to accept it. He spotted her instantly and began to descend. "You came," he said, his voice warm but careful. "You invited me," she replied. "I did not want to be rude." "You could never be rude." Before she could respond, a man in a dark suit approached them. "Mr. Ward, they are ready for your speech." Sarah froze. "Mr. Ward?" Ethan exhaled slowly, knowing the moment he had been avoiding had finally arrived. He turned toward the stage, and the master of ceremonies raised the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our host for the evening, the founder and CEO of Ward Technologies, Mr. Ethan Ward." The applause thundered through the hall. Sarah's heart stopped. Every word he had said about working in tech, every vague smile, every quiet kindness, all of it crashed together into a single truth. The man she had mistaken for an ordinary stranger was a billionaire, the face she had seen on billboards and business magazines, but never recognized in person. Lucas tugged her sleeve. "Mom, that is him. That is Ethan." Her throat tightened. "Yes, baby, that is him." On stage, Ethan's speech was calm and sincere. He spoke about community, about second chances, about how real success meant lifting others up. But as his eyes found hers across the room, his voice softened. "Sometimes, the greatest discoveries begin with a small mistake, a wrong turn, or maybe the wrong table." People laughed gently, unaware of the truth behind his words. Sarah could not move. The noise of applause felt far away, muffled by the storm building inside her. After the speech, she slipped away to the balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly below. She gripped the railing, her breath uneven. A few moments later, Ethan stepped outside. "Sarah, please let me explain." "Explain what?" she said quietly. "That you lied? That you let me sit there like a fool while you played pretend?" "I never meant to deceive you," he said. "That night, I was supposed to meet a partner, not a date. You sat down, and I could not walk away. For once, I was not Mr. Ward. I was just a man having dinner with a woman who made him forget the rest of the world." She shook her head, tears burning in her eyes. "You should have told me." "I know," he whispered. "But I was afraid that once you knew, everything real between us would disappear." Sarah stepped back, her voice trembling. It already did. Without another word, she turned and walked through the ballroom doors, her heels echoing across the marble. Behind her, Ethan stood alone on the balcony, the applause from inside fading into the sound of distant thunder. Sarah left the grand hall with the sound of applause still ringing faintly behind her. The rain had turned steady, streaking the streetlights into long golden lines. She wrapped her thin coat tighter around her shoulders, trying to steady her breath. Her son walked quietly beside her, his small hand gripping hers. Lucas looked up, confusion on his face. "Mom, why are you crying? Did something bad happen?" She forced a shaky smile. "No, sweetheart. Nothing bad. Just grown-up things." But inside, everything hurt. Every memory of their dinners, their laughter, the way Ethan looked at her like she was something rare, all of it felt like glass breaking. The man she thought she had come to know had built his life on a foundation she could never touch. He was not just someone in tech. He was the name written on buildings, the man whose company logo appeared on billboards she passed on the bus. And she was just Sarah Collins, waitress, single mother, dreamer with nothing to offer except sketches and good intentions. By the time they reached home, the city had quieted. Sarah tucked Lucas into bed, brushing his hair back as he mumbled sleepily. "Ethan will say sorry tomorrow. He is nice. You will see." She kissed his forehead but said nothing. When the apartment finally fell silent, she sat at the kitchen table with her sketchbook open in front of her. The drawing of Ethan and Lucas at the art fair stared back at her. She stared for a long time, then closed the book, unable to look any longer. Across town, Ethan stood alone in his penthouse, the city lights cold against the windows. His tie was loosened, his jacket discarded. He had faced investors, competitors, even scandals before, but this was different. This time, he had broken something fragile, something true. Claire called once to congratulate him on the successful gala, but he let it go to voicemail. He poured a glass of water, set it down untouched, and pressed his hands to his eyes. He could still hear her voice on the balcony. "You should have told me." The next morning he tried to call her. Once, twice, then again. No answer. He sent a message, then another. Nothing came back. At the diner, Sarah worked quietly, pretending not to check her phone every few minutes. Her co-workers whispered, wondering why the man who used to visit every morning had suddenly disappeared. She kept her head down, cleaning tables, pouring coffee, forcing herself to breathe. A week passed, then another. One grey afternoon, Ethan showed up at the diner door. He was dressed simply, no suit, no entourage, just him. The bell above the door rang, and every head turned. Sarah froze mid-step. "Sarah," he said softly, "please can we talk?" Her voice was calm, too calm. "There is nothing to talk about, Mr. Ward." He winced at the distance in her tone. "Ethan, please, I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted one part of my life to feel real." She shook her head. "You do not get to decide what is real for me. You had a choice. You could have been honest, and I would have respected that. But you let me believe you were someone else. You let me trust you." 3 months passed. Spring melted into early summer, and the city bloomed again. But Sarah felt no warmth in it. She worked, she paid bills, she smiled when she needed to, and every night she tucked Lucas into bed with stories about heroes who never lied. But when the lights went out, her heart still carried that dull ache of something unfinished. She had not seen Ethan since the day at the diner. Sometimes she wondered if he had already forgotten her, if his life had gone back to the glossy rhythm of boardrooms and private jets. She told herself it did not matter. Yet every time she saw a newsstand with his company's logo, her chest tightened. One Tuesday morning, a letter arrived. It was printed on heavy paper, with no return address. Inside was an invitation to an art exhibition at the Midtown Community Center. The title read, "The Art of Sarah Collins." Her hands trembled. There had to be a mistake. She was not a professional artist. She could not even afford proper canvases most of the time. But when she flipped the card over, a small note was written in handwriting she recognized instantly. "For every dream that deserved to be seen, please come. E." Sarah stared at the note for a long time, her heart pounding. She almost tore it up, almost threw it away, but something inside whispered that maybe, just maybe, she needed to see for herself. That Saturday, she dressed simply and took Lucas by the hand. The community center was filled with people, families, students, art lovers. When she stepped inside, she froze. The walls were lined with her sketches, the same drawings she had done in quiet corners of the diner, at the park, and by her apartment window. Someone had gathered them all, framed them beautifully, and arranged them in a sequence that told her story. A sign near the entrance read, "All proceeds from tonight's auction will fund free art classes for children across the city." Her breath caught. At the far end of the room, Ethan stood near the stage, wearing no tie, just a simple white shirt. He looked nervous in a way she had never seen before. When he saw her, his face softened with relief. He walked toward her slowly, careful, as if afraid one wrong word might break the fragile peace between them. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I did this for you, for your dream. I know I hurt you, and I do not expect forgiveness. But you once told me art should be shared. that beauty means nothing if it is hidden. You taught me that. I only wanted to help your light reach further than I ever could." She stood silent for a moment, tears blurring her vision. "You had no right to do this without asking." "I know," he said, "but I could not let your gift disappear because of me." Ender. She looked around the room, at her drawings, at Lucas smiling proudly as he showed one of her sketches to a group of children. The walls glowed with pieces of her life moments she had never thought anyone would notice. When she turned back to Ethan, her voice was soft. "You should not have done this for me, Ethan." "I did not," he replied. "I did it because it was right." Something in his tone disarmed her. For the first time, she believed him. The crowd began to applaud as a young volunteer announced that the gallery had already raised thousands of dollars. Sarah blinked through her tears. Somewhere deep inside, forgiveness began to stir, not for what he had done, but for what he had finally learned. She whispered almost to herself, "Maybe some mistakes are worth making." Ethan met her eyes, his expression filled with quiet hope. "Then let this be one of them." The applause inside the community center faded into a warm hum, wrapping around Sarah like a soft blanket. She looked again at the paintings. Her paintings hung beneath gentle light. Each sketch held a story: the diner window at sunrise, Lucas asleep on the couch, the park bench where Ethan had handed her cocoa. They were pieces of an ordinary life, made extraordinary by love, pain, and second chances. Ethan stood a few steps away, silent, letting her take it all in. He had never looked more human to her than in that moment, not as a billionaire, not as a man trying to fix things with money, but as someone who had finally learned to listen. When the crowd began to leave, Sarah walked toward him. "You really did all this," she said softly. "Every single piece." He nodded. "I wanted the world to see you the way I do. You said once that beauty should be shared. You taught me that success without kindness is empty. I spent years building things that shine, but tonight I saw what actually matters." Her throat tightened. "Ethan, I do not know what to say." "Then do not say anything," he replied. "Just tell me if there is still a place for me in your life." Sarah looked down at her hands, then at the sketchbook she still carried. She remembered the first night she had met him, how nervous she had been, how he had pretended to be Kevin just to make her feel less out of place. It was a lie that started everything, but somehow that mistake had led them here. She smiled faintly. "You know, it is strange. I spent months hating you for not being honest, but I think that mistake was exactly what I needed to find myself again." Ethan took a slow step closer. Maybe the wrong table was not wrong after all. The corner of her mouth lifted. Maybe it was fate after all. For a long moment, they stood there, eyes locked, the noise of the room fading into something quieter, like the pause before a heartbeat. Then Sarah reached for his hand. It felt familiar, steady, like coming home. Lucas ran toward them, his face glowing. "Mom, Mr. Ethan, they said the art classes start next week. Can I help paint the sign?" Sarah laughed through her tears. "Of course you can, sweetheart." She looked at Ethan, still holding his hand. "You will help too, right?" He smiled, warmth flickering behind his eyes. "Would not miss it for the world." The next weekend, the first community art class opened under a banner that read, "Dreams can fly." Children crowded around easels, their laughter echoing through the hall. Sarah guided their small hands as they painted, while Ethan stood beside her, sleeves rolled up, a brush clumsy in his grip, but his heart completely in it. When the day ended, the three of them stood outside under the fading sunlight. The sky blushed pink above the rooftops, the air calm and full of promise. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper shaped like a crane. He placed it in Sarah's palm. "For the woman who taught me that the best mistakes lead us home." Her eyes filled again, but this time with joy. She whispered, "Yes, Ethan." He smiled. "Yes." "What?" "Yes," she said simply, "to whatever comes next." He leaned forward, kissed her gently, and the city lights flickered on behind them, like stars returning to their places. The wrong table had led her to the right fate, and together they finally found what neither wealth nor struggle alone could give: love that was real, and a family that felt like forever.